The first campaign that we launched, we spent like $5,000 or $6,000 and we didn't get a single lead. We changed one thing, we spent the same amount of money and we were at like a 16, 18x return on ad spend within like 30 days from that point. You guys definitely helped us get the ad strategy going and then also helped us understand how to actually keep building off of that. The year before we started with you guys was probably about like 1.5. That was our first year in business. This year, we're probably on track to do 4.5, potentially 5. So
first off, dude, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I like the name. I thought it was closes into leaders. So I'm
a little surprised. I should have. It is it's a relatively new name we came up with. It was it was one of our marketing conversations. It actually started out as a joke, and we're like, this is actually kind of good. So little behind the scenes. So, dude, one of the first questions that we ask, because we're going to talk all about sales leadership and sales scaling, systems in the back end, all that kind of stuff. But the first question that I always ask everyone is, what is your offer and what is the price point of that?
Yeah, so we kind of have a stack. So our offer primarily starts with some kind of audit, right? So companies are coming to us. I know there's not a lot of information yet on kind of who we are, what we do, but they're coming to us for a ton of different issues. And since we're a done-for-you service, we have to understand their business almost as well as they do before we can make recommendations, before we can actually build, before they trust us. So we have an audit, which is on the front end. That is anywhere from 8,500 to about 15,000. Half of that gets credited towards the scope of work that we derive from that audit. So audit goes into what we call engines, which engines, for example, we have setter engines, we have closer engines, we have show rate engines, we have onboarding engines, renewal engines. We have all these different engines, which are our best practices that we've built off of HubSpot, our systems, for sales teams, fulfillment teams, et cetera, over the last like 3-4 years. The engine price point, it depends on scope, but on average, you're looking at anywhere from 30 to 60 grand, give or take. So those are basically the two price points. On the backside, we have managed service, which is more admin, small rev ops, making sure that they get the most and they're pulling the most revenue out of their new system as possible. Yep.
Cool. So I do want to go back a little bit because I always like to start with that just to give like the context of who we're talking to, what you specialize in. So if we went back though, how did you come up with the idea to start the business? How did it start? Maybe just go back a little bit.
Yeah. So I'll make a long story short if I can. So I kind of had an interesting start in the business. So back in college, I started a bikini company. Long story short, it ended up
doing bikini company?
A bikini company.
Like e-com?
Like e-com, like drop shipping.
Nice. Okay, got it.
So anyways, it started doing well. And that led me into some marketing. So we started a marketing agency, which led me into content curation, which led me into directing music videos and getting artists ready for label, basically production and stuff along those lines, which ultimately led me to meeting a guy named Justin in Miami at an event. Actually, I think this was a Cardone event. So this was back when I was like 19. And we started a company called Social X, which was like a crowdsourced consulting company. It was basically you paid us a subscription. We would bring in big name consultants and basically pay their fees. They'd come in, coach groups of people. So we had 150, 200 startups basically paying us a subscription. From that point, when that company kind of ended, I had a lot of startups and I didn't really know what my really superpower or strength was. I was really young. So my basically skill set was connecting and bringing people in to do all the coaching. But I knew I was good at sales. So some of these companies were basically hitting me up. I was looking for what next. And the thing that came to me was a company called Connected, which was a software company at the time, very, very early. And, I was talking to them and they were like, hey, we need somebody to build and run a sales team. We've gone at it a few times, haven't been able to get it up. So anyways, I took that over and within about 6 months, took them from 0 reps to 65 full cycle, outgrew 2 offices, had a remote team, an office team, and went from about 30K MRR to about 50 or 500K MRR in about 6 months. And I found what I was really good at. So I started doing this fractional kind of basically like bar rescue type sales rescue for sales teams for quite a long time. And ultimately, when these companies would get past that 1 million a month mark, 1.2, 1.5, we weren't systems focused yet. It was all people focused. right? So we were just really good at mass recruiting, onboarding, training, milestones, comp plans, just training in general, getting people up off the ground, and really scaling that side out. But we never had systems. So we were hiring all these systems companies to come in, and transparently, they were dropping the ball on pretty much everything you could imagine. They didn't understand sales. They didn't understand what we were trying to accomplish. They were building things way too complicated, so we couldn't manage anything. And their scopes were over like 6 months, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars to get these things done. So one weekend we decided to take one of those scopes and do it ourselves, and we did it in a few days. And it was way better and way more what we were looking for. And anyways, what ended up happening is all those clients that we had done the kind of fractional takeover, build up, exit model with came to us and said, we want the same thing. And that's what started Sales Momentum.
Nice. One really quick thing, just to, because I want to hit on this one piece, is so when you went from that first company that you were with, the creative side, and then transition more into like taking over the sales team, what was some of the things? It's probably very similar to what you do now, but what were some of the things, like maybe 2 or 3 things that you changed that helped those companies scale?
Are you saying back when I was doing the sales team kind of take over?
Yeah, when you first figured out that was like the thing that you were good at.
Yeah, so I had to build that first team basically blindfolded. I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have any coaches. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I was great at building this like almost fraternity styled culture where it was like very much locker room. We were recruiting basically ex-college athletes. Like that was our target market for who we were going after. And I was really good at bringing in competition. So we started pod structures. We knew we wanted to grow everybody bottom up. So we wanted new hire groups. Once that became too busy for me to do one-on-ones all the time, we started doing group hires, right? When the group hires started coming in, we needed a pod structure. So we started doing drafting with sales leads. So sales leads, we'd literally have like a NFL draft for our new hires every single month. So for me in the beginning, it was all about building that culture that was very attractive and made recruiting easy, made people want to be there. They didn't feel like they were sitting there not making, I mean, some people would sit there and not make money for 3 months, but they didn't want to leave. So I learned how to put together a really good culture, and out of necessity, I started figuring out how to manage that. Right. So I started to understand decentralized leadership. I started to understand KPIs and forecasting and how to incentivize based on comp, how to put in competition. And that's ultimately what gave me all the frameworks to bring into all of these other companies. So when I was going into that, it was purely about figuring out our growth plan in terms of pods, right? And for us, it was SDRs, closers, sales leads. When that got overbearing, I needed to figure out how to build training material. So we started putting basically assessments in between promotions. So we had 3 milestones for the SDRs, 3 milestones for the closers, 3 milestones for the sales leads. And once they hit their 3rd milestone, they would basically complete an assessment. And that assessment was like, take your best 10 recordings, write your own script, mentor one of the new guys for 2 weeks, get this metric up, etc. So I was doing all these things out of necessity that I wasn't really aware of that were massively impactful. Because if you think all those assessments go in place, people are working towards milestones, everything's competition based. 6 months later, all of your training material is now not even what you made. It's what your best people have come up through the org chart basically doing. So it was purely out of just what can I do to make this easier for myself? And I can't manage all 65 of these guys. How do I figure out how to do this? And I started reading a lot of Jocko Willink books, extreme ownership, stuff along those lines. They talk about, in a high stress environment, how many people somebody can actually manage, which I think the number is 7 or 8. So we started building all these pod structures and all these formations that we would come into companies with and say, this is what we need to fill. Each one of these pods takes X amount of leads, which means you need X amount of ad spend, right? We should be on average hitting this percentage of lead to booking, right? We want this show rate. We want this close rate. So each pod, if we're going to be doing 1 million, you have 3 pods, they all need to produce 333,000. And this is the formula that allows us to get there.
For someone that doesn't really quick, for someone that doesn't know what a pod is, maybe just give like a quick breakdown and like why it's beneficial to have pods versus any other way.
Yeah. So for a pod structure to work, at least the way that we've done it, it is typically 4 to 5 SDRs with 2 to 3 closers and a sales lead, right? So your sales lead is your captain player, right? They're the player coach. They are not a manager, right? They're the shiny star that everybody wants to be like. They're the top closer. They're the top revenue driver, right? They're who you want to replicate. So they're at the top of your pod structure, right? Think of like in the military, right? You've got your Overwatch sniper, you've got your machine gun team, you have your rifleman, you have your medic, right? That's what a pod structure is in the sales department. So if you look at a 25-person team, right, maybe there's 3 pods, right? So you have 3 sales leads, three closers, right? And then a group of 4 SDRs. And the reason it's beneficial is because if you're at the top as a sales director and you're trying to manage actively and basically, especially roster management or training, it becomes very difficult when you have 25, 30, 40 people underneath you. So the way that we did it is we were managing the sales leads were managing the pods, right? And it allowed us structure for competition, right? So the way that we ran it is every month, whoever was the top producing pod, that pod would take an increase in commission for the next 30 days. And they were constantly battling off of that.
Nice.
We didn't get big bonus checks because we wanted them to work towards their bonus the next month. So it was big month, even bigger month instead of big month, nothing. Right?
Yeah.
Typically in sales. So it just gave us a format to build off of. It gave us a format to recruit from. It gave us a format for us to allow people to work for the roles that they wanted, not the roles they have. And it gave us easy answers. So, hey, Aaron, when can I get promoted? You haven't hit your milestones yet. Hit your milestones, right? So it just made things simpler for us to manage. It allowed us to drive a lot more competition. And at the same time, it made recruiting and formulas of what we were trying to get from each pod very, very easy. Once we hit our baseline on those 3 pods, right, and managing them, it was basically like we want 80% of that pod above KPI every month, right? So once we had 3 pods that were all above 80% KPI in terms of the people inside of it, right, then we were focused on trying to increase conversion, increase lead quality, increase these different things so we could get more production out of the pod itself instead of just trying to add more pods, right? Because then you're recruiting, hiring, and you never really get to a point where it's like, maybe you're producing 200K per pod. Maybe you could be producing 500,000, right? With less people. So that's how we had to do it in order to scale. And also it was what we had to do to be able to work with 3 or 4 or 5 companies at a time in the capacity that we were working with them in. So I hope that gives some context, but
Yeah.
it's a great way to plan how you're going to scale on the sales team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I think the biggest part there is like the competition aspect, right? Because like
100%.
if you can when you build out like those separate pods, like they're always going against each other, and like you have that in just like a regular sales team structure. But I think like what you said, it's like that camaraderie aspect of like this is like a team, and we're gonna like die trying to like become like be at the top. So that's
100%.
solid. The other thing that you said that I resonated with was the like building the systems out of necessity, because that's really what closers.io was built off of. Is like, Cole, when he first started it, he was just a really good sales guy, right? And then like he was teaching others how to get better at sales. And it's like he didn't just like start recruiting because, hey, this is a good business model. Yeah, it makes good money, but he started it because our clients needed salespeople. And so it's like he built that out of necessity. And like every layer of the business was built out of necessity versus seeing somebody else doing it and being like, hey, this is a quick money grab. Let me do that. Because a lot of times it just doesn't work because you haven't gone through the steps to see what the actual problems are to fill those gaps to then build your own system.
100%. I did not know what I was doing was going to be replicatable or if it was going to be successful. It just felt right. I was confident that this was going to work with the people that I had. And then once that first case study hit, it was kind of just an avalanche, right? How did you do that? We need this. I want this to work. We spend a lot of money on ads. Our sales team is constantly churning. We can't get people to promote themselves. We can't, so being able to go off that framework and constantly fit the businesses that we were working with into something that we were confident in that was going to work and that we had proven became the thing that we were really good at. Right. Which then obviously led us to the systems component later on, because it was like, you can't have a big pod structure and no systems. You have to have good reporting. You need a good system that actually these people can build off of. And you need to be able to give people the tools that they need to do really well. So, but yeah, it was a trial by fire for sure.
So that leads in terms of like the transition into the system optimization part. So again, another part where you had to build out a necessity because you tried to work with these other companies, they didn't work out, they didn't know what they were doing, so you built it out yourself. How did you go about building out that? What are some of like the key things that the system optimization helps with when it comes to scale?
Yeah, so I think the first problem we ran into is the people we were hiring were great. They were really smart. They understood tech. But we understood what a sales team looked like, smelled like, tastes like at every level. So we knew how people were using the tool. We knew how people wanted to be using the tool. We knew what would help them more, right? We knew what numbers we were needing to look at. And to try and hire these individuals and explain that to them and then constantly go through revisions and edits, it was so painful to try and do that with them and do everything that we had going on. So the first thing was really reporting. Like I was spending hours and hours and hours every single week just trying to get numbers on these teams. And again, necessity came and I was like, I'm done doing this. I'm going to go figure this out. So the first piece was reporting. How do I want to show these guys their dashboards every single morning? How do I want to roll it up into like my master dashboard? How do I want to track my commissions? How do I want to do all of these things? And can I make these numbers automated? And we had built off pretty much everything. So we had done Close, we had done GHL, we had done Infusionsoft, Pipedrive, Salesforce, and we had done a few builds on HubSpot. And what we found is with HubSpot, we can operate our marketing, our sales, our fulfillment, our operations, and all of our reporting across the entire company out of one system, right? And it was scalable. Like it had the enterprise side that we were looking for some of the bigger companies, permission sets, data, like all of the different things that we would need. So it was just kind of one piece leading to the other. The problems we were trying to solve for were show rate, lead management, prioritization, delegation, right? There was all these different small subset of things that were just becoming very difficult because we didn't really have a standard system that we like to work off of. So HubSpot ultimately became the winner of all of those stacks that we had used. Yeah, I mean, we just got obsessed with it. We just got absolutely obsessed with it. It was something that we realized we could scale these teams 3, 4, 5 times faster if we had the foundation that we needed up front instead of trying to build it after we had a big team involved already, right? So it was something that we realized, like, the earlier we can do this, the more scalability these companies are going to have, the higher throughput they're going to have. And if they're spending $1 and getting 4 out, right, once we're done, they're going to spend $1 and get 6, 7, $8 out. So now they're more profitable. The time to value is quicker. You know, it was just a no-brainer for us to go into this space. And when we looked around, there was just not a lot of people that were able to do what we were doing specifically on HubSpot. It just wasn't there. So that is where we started. And it was kind of interesting. It was like, as soon as we took that turn, every piece that we needed was kind of coming to us. People that were extremely talented were, hey, I like the clients you're working with. I want to come work with you. Right. So we got a really awesome team. HubSpot was innovating on some of the features that were our biggest bottlenecks and pain points. So they had fixed a lot of the issues that we were running into. And again, we just obsessed over it for about a year. You know, a year later, we were the top partner in 2023 out of HubSpot in the United States. We've done absurd amount of business with them, and we're probably somewhere around 300 projects completed now over about the last 2.5, 3 years. So just had fun with it. Like, I don't know how else to put it other than it just became something that was invigorating. Like the first sales team that I built, that's how it felt when I started getting into the system side.
Yeah, I think there definitely has to be like a little bit of obsession involved if like you grow something and you grow something really quick. Like I think that's obviously normal. But I know one question that I'm sure people are asking is because you're talking a lot about HubSpot, and then you mentioned a lot of the other ones, you know, Close and GHL and all these others. What would you like? Would you recommend people to switch to HubSpot, or is it something where you only really need HubSpot if you're looking to scale to bigger numbers? What do you usually, if someone asks you that, what's usually advice?
Well, I think, so it's tough because I don't, depending on who you are listening to this, right? When you look at these other platforms, let's take Close first, right? Close is a sales tool, right? There's no CS, there's no marketing, there's not very good reporting. It's very it's kind of cut and dry. So when you sign up with it, it's very turnkey. You can use it, right? There's not a lot of stuff you got to do with it unless you're going to go crazy and build a bunch of zaps and connect a bunch of tools to it and do all these different things, which is where a lot of people come to us because their stuff is falling apart, right? So if you build into some of these platforms early and then you scale, you run into a lot of headaches, right? A lot of headaches. And then there's platforms like, let's say, Go High Level, right? Where it's comparable to HubSpot, but it's missing like hundreds of millions of dollars of development to make it what HubSpot is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So when you look at HubSpot and you look at a tool like that, there's really two things that you can scale on for a very, very long time, and where they're going to have everything that you need and then some. And that's going to be Salesforce and HubSpot. Problem with Salesforce is it takes a lot of engineering power and capability, and it's integration after integration after integration after integration. And you're basically, it's a lot longer time to value. It's much more expensive in the long run. And it's like turning a cruise ship. You're not very nimble. Like you're stuck in one lane and you can't really turn out of it. On the HubSpot side, marketing, sales, and fulfillment, as well as all of your reporting, all your tracking, everything is inside of one system. So as you scale, right, instead of trying to work reporting and numbers and permissions and all these different things off of multiple different tools, right, you can keep it in one. So anyways, long answer short, I think if you're confident in what you're doing and you want to have confidence over your systems and you want to have more control while staying very agile, and you want to be able to pull the reporting, you want to be able to do some really wicked, crazy stuff without the complexity, then HubSpot is definitely the answer for you. If you're not a very systems focused company and you just have a really good product and you're really good at selling it, you can get away with some of these other tools for quite some time. But when you hit that mark down the line where it doesn't work anymore, you're going to either fall into the knee jerk and bolt on software, and you're going to end up throwing a lot of bodies at trying to maintain and manage this thing, or you're going to have to do a migration, right, into something like HubSpot. So the short answer is if you're sub 100K and you're just getting things off the ground and you're moving and you're running, stick with the easy cheap platform, right? As soon as you feel confident that you really have some ability to scale, you need to start looking at what the long-term implication of what system and operations you're actually running off of. So I hope that gives some kind of context here.
Yeah, that's really because we also use HubSpot. By the way, this is not sponsored by HubSpot, but I guess it could be at this point. But yeah, I mean that's what we tell everyone. It's like it's not necessarily like you need to use this or you need to use this. However, just understand that once you start getting confident around it, the migration will be way easier when you're at sub 100 grand a month versus you're hitting 1 million a month, right? It's going to be way more difficult. And then when you're at those larger areas of scale, is the opportunity cost is way higher for the amount of time that the system's down because of the migration that you have to figure out, So I think that's perfect. So in that part, you talked about, the systems falling apart, and, we were talking about before too, you have like really two different clients that you work with. So let's break down those two type of clients and, kind of like the methods that you use to help those different people scale.
Yeah. So I mean, two different types of clients. You already talked about one. It's the company that builds into the wrong tech stack. They get up to $1 million, $2 million, $3 million a month, and they are stuck. They can't get their systems to work. I think I used the analogy to you. They're building off quicksand. So as fast as they're building and fixing things, they're sinking, right? So there's never this optimal state of everybody sleeps well at night knowing their systems are working well, right? It's just constantly, what fire are we going to put out? And they're constantly building on top of broken shit, basically, right? So in that context, we're typically working with them to migrate them to HubSpot. We're consolidating the tech. We're moving marketing, sales, and fulfillment operations into one platform. We're driving the reporting that they want. And then we're onboarding and training the teams into the new system so they get the most use out of it. A lot of what we focus on during those migrations are where the leaks are happening, right? When you have a company that's doing $1 million, or even a few $100,000 a month, when you're looking at all of the different numbers across the sales process, right? What's our lead to booking percentage? What's our discovery show rate? What's our close rate? How many people do we rebook that no show? Is it an automated process? Is it all manual, right? How many people fall through our time decay, which time decay, if anybody doesn't understand, it's if somebody's qualified and you complete that call with them, right? They haven't moved into the next step. They're not a red zone, which I'll explain in a second. But they're sitting in like a qualified completed stage. Time decay is how long you want to give that rep before it gets handed back to marketing to try and re-engage them and bring them back into the sales process, right? So we're looking at all of these different areas, and we're basically developing a plan to get increases off of those by putting in basically like bolsters around their drop-off points. So by the time that we're done, they have a higher throughput of their system, maybe 2% on the lead to booking, maybe 5% or 10% on the show rate, maybe they're rebooking at 10, 15% instead of 0, right? And that for a company that size produces millions of dollars a year in return, right?
Yeah.
So there's that, right? Which is a migration and an optimization across their processes and just their systems in general. The other side of who we typically work with is going to be earlier on companies that know they're not built the way they need to be to scale. And it's right before they hit that kind of explosion mark, right? 100K, 200K. We're like, hey, we're already running into some of these issues. I'm bouncing around from tech to tech. I'm looking all over the place. Like, I just need something solid, right? In that case, we're going in and we build off of what we call the MOS, which is our best practices for coaches, consultants, SaaS, right? We have a few different basically playbooks that will run, but that's our foundation. That's everything that you're going to need now and later in terms of scale. We're going to set up how the leads come in, the correspondence pass, all of the prioritization, the lead, everything across that. We're getting set up so that they don't have to worry about systems for a while, right? So those are the two different types of clients that come with us. Typically, the one I just referred to, the earlier on, they're going to be somebody who is either ran or this is not their first business, right? Like they know what they're going to be doing. They have marketing figured out. They know they're about to scale, and they do not want to go through probably what they went through with past companies, which is being monster and having to migrate and do all those other things, right? So those are really the two different types of clients that we work with. And there's enigmas that come to us, monster $500 million, whatever, roofing companies, or even, Patrick and those guys, so it's, as long as it's within the realm of online high ticket sales, that's typically who we're going to work with.
Nice. What are some because you mentioned Patrick and some of these other companies, what are some well, maybe we'll hit two sides. Let's hit what's like the average result that someone could expect when they come in and work with you. And then maybe some like the bigger companies that you've worked with, like what you've been able to help those people scale to. So two different sides.
Yeah. So when we're looking at results, we always take a snapshot before we do the build or the migration and then after. And if we take all of our clients, like what we kind of stick to and what Ammon has made us put forefront of everything is typically across the initial sales conversation and on the backside, we can get about a 10 to 15% lift on show. And then it's purely throughput of that pipeline. So if we're looking at, let's say, for example, a lead to close percentage of 3-4%, right? Typically, if we take that and we look over the next 90 days, we're getting about a double in the lead to close, and we're getting about, 10, 15% on show rate. And it's going to depend on the company and the industry and these different things. But all we're looking to do is get more sound operations, way better reporting, and increases across conversion across that sales process, right? And actually, one thing that's kind of interesting, and this will probably hit with your guys' audience a little bit more. One of the biggest opportunities that we find once companies are past 300-400K is actually the back end renewal upsell process with their CS team, right? Most people are looking only at the front end. We got to fix this, our show rate, our setters, or this, that, whatever. They never really pay attention to that backside and how they're actually working that renewal, testimonial, all of those different pieces, the referral collection. So a lot of the times we're bringing something that's brand new into the business that drives a lot of revenue. So, we've got a bunch of case studies and some other stuff if you guys want to go like into the weeds of some of the stuff that we've done, which is on our website. But we're looking for doubles in specific metrics: double lead to booking, double lead to close. We're looking for marginal increases across show rate. We're looking for marginal increases on rebook percentages, right? We're looking for basically red zone close rate, which is everybody we make an offer to, what our close rate is from that number. And yeah, we want to button up and close basically any kind of leakage that we have across the sales pipeline. I think one other piece that's something that is not necessarily what we're focused on, but it happens through what we do, is the ROAS, the return on ad spend. When we look at how we build our pipelines, right, between all these different stages that have what we would call a time decay, which, for example, we're on a discovery call. I complete that call with you, you're qualified, but you don't book a strategy call for whatever reason, or a closing call, whatever the case might be, right? I have X amount of time, and if that time basically expires, you're getting handed back to marketing. So everything in our system constantly hands back all of our qualified or people that are time decaying out in the system back to marketing. And as soon as they meet any kind of threshold, opening X amount of emails, clicking back to our website, clicking an ad, they get back introduced into the sales process. So when we constantly have everything recycling through and getting the absolute most out of every single lead that comes into our system, in a very automated fashion, right, we can drastically increase what the actual return or revenue is in that company over a longer period of time. So it's all about conversion rate, right? It's scaling through very specific numbers and then putting in very specific things to shore up all the leakage that these companies have. And it's going to depend industry to industry. So I hope that answers your question, but there's quite a bit of different areas that we focus on depending on the client.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing with the offer that you have too is it's all about optimization, not about like, hey, you need to put more money in ads, right? You literally all you're doing is just taking what they already have, right? You're just touching what's happening after marketing and then just optimizing on that. So they literally just like, you patch up the holes and hey, here's some like new revenue that you weren't tapping into.
100%. And I think that's one thing that I'll add is, our results are not predicated off of more ad spend, right? The double need to close, the double revenue, some of the bigger increases that we have on our website, they're not spending anything more. And usually they go down in the number of sales reps that they have. It's purely an efficiency play, right? Same ad spend, same leads, right? Higher conversion, higher throughput, right? And that ultimately allows them a lot more ability to do what they want to do because they have higher margins. Their systems are working well. They have good reporting. They can read and figure out what they need to hyperfixate on. And when people go from not being able to do that to doing that, it opens a completely different world of business to them. So, yeah.
Yeah, quick story on that because you mentioned like having to go down in reps. I was talking to his buddy of mine the other day. He's not in STA yet, but I was talking to him and I was just asking like basic questions like how many reps do you have, like what is their conversion rate, just basic stuff to figure out what the bottleneck was. And he's like, yeah, I have not. I think he said he had 9 reps. And I was like, okay, cool. Like what's revenue? He's like, yeah, last month we did like 30,000. And I was like,
huh?
How are you doing 30,000 with 9 reps? Like, how many calls are they're close? Like, and then obviously I ask more questions. So it just goes back to that process of a lot of times people they think that the problem is that they need more closers, but the reality is what you've probably seen is like they just need to optimize a little bit more.
Well, when you're looking at scale, when it comes to a sales team, let's just say, right? I mean, there's really like 3 ways. You can add more bodies, right? You can spend more money, right? Or you can increase conversion. And a lot of people, it's much easier to throw money at something and feel like it's going to work, or hire a bunch more people because for whatever reason, that's what a lot of people default to. Whenever people are facing problems, it's either spend more money at it or throw bodies at it, usually. They'll look at conversion and look at system and look at process and look at all those things it's more difficult to do. And it requires people to slow down and think about it. So, yeah, I mean, you don't really have any other options other than, those 3 things, right? And before you spend more money and before you spend, put more bodies on something, like conversion should be something you're confident about, very confident about.
Yeah.
And something that you feel good about too, right? If you're trying to scale and, I'm not throwing shade, but if you have $30,000 in revenue, how are you supposed to support a sales team of 9 people?
Yeah, exactly.
You know
That's
what
what
I
I
mean?
said.
Like,
I was like, how much are they making? It's like, I think he said something like 5 of them hadn't made anything. Like it was a big mess. So we won't have to go down the
so,
rabbit hole. Yeah.
and I'll put one more point. When you have really good systems, like one of our sales guys uses this analogy really well. Because when he's talking to people and they want to scale their sales team, he'll talk to them about systems and realize they have no systems. And he's like, look, if you're, I don't know, let's take LeBron and you're going to all these different organizations and before you're actually in the NBA and you're trying to figure out where you want to go or whatever the case may be, maybe it's college. If somebody says, yeah, you're going to come here and make a ton of money, you're going to be the star, whatever, just off rip, versus the person that says, hey, look, here's our plan for you. We have a process and a system. You're going to go from practice to second half to first half to starting first half to captain. And here's how you're going to do it, right? Here's the tools you're going to use. This is everything that you have access to. That's a much more confident and sound plan to recruit really, really good talent, right? You have to give them a ladder and you have to give them the tools to climb that ladder up front. And if you can't do those 2 things, don't expect good talent at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right. If you have good systems, you have a good process, you can tell them, hey, here's your 3 milestones to get to closer. Here's your 3 milestones to get to a sales lead, right? This is how we promote. This is how we do these things. This is what we want you focused on. And by the way, you have a great support system around you, right? You're not doing a bunch of manual, mundane bullshit all the time. Like we want you focused on X, Y, and Z. You can recruit really good talent. People are excited because most people don't have good systems for their sales team. It's the wild, wild west. So if you can prove that you do and you can show them that, people want to work with you, right?
Yeah.
Great closers, great setters, great people in sales are going to want to work with you because you've done the work to actually give them the ecosystem that they can thrive in. So
and yeah, you have to look at like like where they're leveraging or where their time is best leveraged too, right? Because like if you're making a closer or a setter, do an end of day report and manually input metrics and do this whole thing where they could have taken 2 or 3 more calls. It's like you look at that over, a year's time. It's like you're losing out on a ton of opportunity because you don't have the system set up.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say to that, we've tried the whole switch away from manual reporting to automated, like overnight type of just rip the Band-Aid. What we've actually found is even if let's say someone listens to us and they're like, okay, I got to get all of my sales metrics generating, right? So I can look at them, whatever the case may be. What we found is when you rip the Band-Aid and now all of a sudden they're not responsible for doing EODs or filling out metrics or whatever the case may be, performance actually sometimes goes way down because they're not focused on their numbers. So when you're doing that, typically you want to bring that dashboard to the morning meeting every single day, but you still want them weaning off of that manual tracking, right? So get rid of their call volume from their manual tracking, right? You can easily track that. Get rid of the number of calls that they took, right? But have them still track their close rate and these things and these little tiny metrics that allow them to stay focused on those things at the end of every day. So you don't just rip the Band-Aid and they're blindly running around now, right? You kind of have to wean them off into automated reporting. Automated reporting is amazing, right? But it does have some downfall if your whole team is used to paying attention to things by them doing it manually at the end of every day, right?
Yeah.
So you do have to roll that out and make sure it's not just a, next day switch. Because it throws people off. You want people focused on those numbers. So I just want to throw that in there because I know somebody's thinking like, yeah, I got to make everything reported. I got to automate everything.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And when we're going through these things too, like I think the idea, or at least what we want to put out there, is not like don't listen to this episode and like go out and change everything really quickly. Like you said, make some smaller tweaks and see how the optimizations help. So one thing you did mention to kind of transition a little bit, you mentioned Ammon sitting you down and telling you a couple of things to do. So one of the things we talked about before is you said we met at you met Ammon and Cole at the at Patrick Bet David's event, and you were skeptical at the beginning. So I guess why were you skeptical about working with us, and what kind of got you over that hump of jumping in?
I thought you guys were just sales, recruiting, and that side, right? And that was something I was extremely confident in, right? So I was just like, guys, I don't need the recruiting side. I don't need those things. Like, I think what actually ended up happening was I was like, dude, if you guys just teach me how to market like you guys do, that's what I would need. And they're like, yeah, we do that. And I was like, well then, yeah, enough said. Let's go. Right.
Yeah.
So I was very confident in what I was doing in terms of the sales side. It was earlier on. I had a much smaller team. And yeah, I came on board purely for figuring out the paid side because our entire business was purely referral based. All of our business was coming through strategic partnerships and referrals. We had never ran any kind of paid ads. We had never done any kind, like we weren't doing anything. It was all word of mouth basically on how we built the first couple 7 figures of the business, right? So I wanted the consistency of paid and organic. And that's when Eamon was like, yeah, let's just come get a cigar with me and Igor. We're going to talk to you about what you guys could do. Here's what we're going to, this is what it would look like. And then, yeah, I just signed up right there. And eventually, the reason I joined Boardroom was because the team got much bigger. And I was like, hey, I can't do all the work with you guys anymore. Love you guys, but like, I have so much other things I need to do. Like there's a gap between me being able to spend time with you guys and get you what you need. So start working with my team. I don't want to be the main POC anymore. I want Riley, who's the head of our sales. I want Gavin, who's doing like, I want them to work with you guys so that they can start learning instead of me doing all this stuff. So that's when I bumped up and Ammon got me for Boardroom. So
the deals go down in the cigar lounge every time.
I should know.
So on the ad side, because it's funny, and I love doing these podcasts because it kind of like it gives more ideas for like our marketing. But I think because this is episode 5, 4 out of the 5 people have mentioned like, I just thought you guys were the sales guys, right? Sales and recruiting. So what was, I guess, the process that when you came in to get your ads up and running, how was that process overall?
I'll be honest, it was really rough in the beginning because I was a perfectionist and Eamon was like, dude, look, you're trying to educate everybody on everything you do. No one understands anything when you go into the weeds. You know what I mean? The only person that's going to understand is either the sales director or the CRO or maybe this, so you can't market like that. So it took a little bit, maybe like a month or so, for us to get clear on like how we were going to position ourselves in the paid side. So it was first figuring out that, then it was kind of more of a mental shift of being in front of a camera and talking about show rates and lead to booking and conversion rates instead of all the very specific nuance, like deep weed bullshit that we do in these projects, which not a lot of people understand. So it was that transition first. We launched the first, funnel. Ammon helped us write it. We launched the first couple ads, and actually, we the first campaign that we launched, we spent like maybe it was like $5,000 or $6,000, and we didn't get a single lead over like a week and a half. We changed one thing. I can't remember exactly what it was, but we jumped on. I don't remember what it was. It was something very small, whatever. We changed one thing. We spent the same amount of money and we were at like a 16, 18x return on ad spend within like 30 days from that point. And it evened out, right? But
yeah, that's a massive open loop.
It was, I mean, dude,
it's like
that's
a marketing
what I'm saying.
thing. Like click down below and we'll tell you what the one thing is.
I mean, dude, it was rough. It was like a freaking boxing match because I didn't like being in front of a camera. I didn't like ads. I didn't like guarantees. I didn't like anything that I was doing initially. And I had to understand how the marketing message needed to be presented and how that actually went out. Cause I'm not a marketer. I am now. I'm decent, right? I'm learning, but I had to learn that. And it took some time, it took some blood, but things have gone very well now. And we've got a very sound kind of foundation across the marketing side at this point, which is about a year later. So yeah, I mean, you guys definitely helped us get the ad strategy going, and then also helped us understand how to actually really kind of keep building off of that, right? So yeah, it was like I said, it was a boxing match at first, but that's usually how the best things end up. It's
Exactly.
he's got to keep going, because there was points where I was just like, screw this, like this is taking too much of my time. I don't see any results. Like I'm just gonna go back to doing what I was doing. But yeah, Igor and Ammon kept calling me soft, and I was like, you know what?
That's their go-to line. You're either soft or hard. You can't, and you're not
all
settling for soft.
I was like, all right, let's keep going. So
Yeah. So dude,
and
I know
yeah,
I know we're coming up on time. I want to be respectful of your time.
sure.
So what would you say? How would I put this? So obviously one of the biggest questions that people wonder is like, okay, cool, you worked with these guys. Like, what was the before and after? So give me just a quick rundown before and after revenue from working with us over the last year.
So before we had paid running, the year before we started with you guys was probably about like 1.5. That was our first year in business, as sales momentum prior to the fractional stuff. This year we're probably on track to do 4.5, potentially 5. So, I mean, we've
Nice.
4x to 5x, and we probably could, if we were an info product or a SaaS or a software, we could
Yeah.
throttle it, but we're fulfillment. We have to scale fulfillment as we go, and we can't do big jumps in terms of like, there's a 10x for us would ruin our business. And I'd love to say that we could do that, but we have to throttle marketing and fulfillment back and forth. So, but dude, we've grown a lot. And yeah, a lot of it's through paid now. We still have the referral sources and organic starting to come on, but the paid side has definitely been a big piece, big piece. So
Sweet, man. Well, dude, I appreciate the time jumping on. What I usually end this with is just, think about one, because I'm gonna do an outro super quickly, but think about one just like biggest takeaway that you'd get, or not even takeaway, but like golden nugget, something that you can share with the audience that would just be like just a takeaway that you would give to somebody listening. So think about that. I'll give you like 30 seconds and I'll do this outro super quickly. So if you're watching this and you made it up to this point, we've been talking for almost an hour. So you're probably somewhat interested in what it's like to work with us at, Closer.io, Sales Team Accelerator, and Boardroom. So if you're interested, there's a link down in the description, either on YouTube or on the podcast app down in the show notes. It's a quick application. Go through that, and it'll give you an option to book a call with our team. We do consultations a little bit differently than most. Is we literally put together what we call your scaling thesis, really understanding like where you are in your business. What are going to be the couple things, like the couple bottlenecks within your business that could unlock like a massive growth. And some things could be, like we've talked about, on this episode, some things that could be super simple in terms of change. So again, no, that's not a hard pressure sales call or anything like that. Click the link down in the description or in the show notes on the podcast app. So Aaron, what you got? Last tip for beautiful people.
I'll say this: when it comes to systems, they're built before you start building the actual system. So when you go into building anything, CRM, your marketing software, your reports, your tracking, whatever the case may be, it's just like a building. You need to design it. You need to understand where the windows are going to go, where the walls are going to go up, where your kitchen's going to be. You need to actually have a plan going into building. Where companies fail, and they fail the quickest, is when they get stuck in that reactionary building process of, we have a problem, build it. We have another problem, build more, right? When you're going into building a system, building a CRM, building anything when it comes to software, CRMs, or systems in general, build a plan first. And I know that sounds like duh, but people don't do it. They just don't do it. They don't build a plan. There's no blueprint. And then they get into this reactionary, just build mode, and they end up with a shit show. So if this has inspired you to go into looking at HubSpot or anything else in terms of systems, sit down, build a wireframe, figure out where your leaks are, figure out your numbers, and figure out what you're actually going to focus on first, and design it, right? Put the plan in place before you actually start building. It's going to save you a lot of time, and you're going to get way better results. So
and if someone's listening and they're like, I don't want to deal with that headache, how do they find you and connect with you so that you can build out the systems for them?
Yeah, so we do the design process. We obviously do implementation and management of the systems, et cetera. You guys can either find me on Instagram. I also started just posting a bunch of stuff on YouTube. So if you're curious on how these systems look, go check it out. It's just Aaron Platt. And then, yeah, go to salesmomentum.io and you guys can learn more about us.
Let's go. All right, guys, we will go ahead and leave all that stuff down in the description as well. So check those out. Also, book a call with our team if you want to check out what we can do for you, put together the scaling thesis and help you grow the business. So that being said, appreciate Aaron for jumping on here and giving us the hour of going into systems. If you have any questions, let us know. We'll see you guys at the next episode. Talk soon. Peace.
Peace.